Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shore.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the latest look back at Talking Heads. Charges for carrier bags, accommodating cruise ships, and a bid to reform the island's abortion laws were topics which were up for discussion this week. Here's Stu Peters with more.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
How should the island's approach to international development and aid be revised? A review of the government's International Development Committee has been put on hold. Policy and Reform Minister Chris Thomas says that he hopes to start what he calls intense dialogue on the matter in the next 2 months. What do you think about this? How should the island's approach to international aid and development be changed? Does it need to be changed? Reduce civil servant pensions by 10%. The money saved will solve all world hunger issues, if only. Won't even touch the sides of it, but OK, thank you for that. We've got Howard on about international aid. Hello, Howard.
Personally, I'd stop it.
Oh.
Yes, because they're crying poverty in the government. They're cutting everything for the Joe public out here, and they're standing there with a big grin on their face, handing our money out to people who, at the end of the day, haven't earned it. They haven't paid taxes on our monies, yet we're quite prepared, shout and skint, and hang on, I've got £1 left in my pocket, I'll give you 2.
You see, I'm very conflicted about this. When you see these pictures of children starving in Africa or wherever it might be, your heart goes out to them and you think, you know, really, the Western world ought to do more to try and help that sort of a situation. Yeah. But then I also see your point of view about it because...
Yeah. If they're going to do that, send them actual foodstuffs out.
Yes, or allow individuals to decide if they want to give money. Because let's face it, you know, if the government is sending our tax money out in international aid, it's not just the rich people who are being taxed, it's everybody. So you've got people who are finding it hard to make ends meet, yet part of their money is effectively being sent the other side of the world to no local benefit at all.
Exactly. You hear this all the time about how many food banks have started up on the island.
Yeah.
The food banks, now, if we're poor enough to require, now, there's another one I'm sceptical about, to require food banks, why on earth are we sending money and goods to countries that mean absolutely nothing to us in a sense? Okay, as you just rightly said, you're going to see children, you're going to see this starving. But this is the film crews, this is the media, and they're all guilty of it. Show you the worst case scenario and a bleeding heart screams money.
I saw a thing, I can't remember if it was on social media or in one of the newspaper websites last week, that said that I think somebody had commented that the state of the NHS in the UK, it was a humanitarian crisis. I think they were the words.
Cross.
And somebody said, why are we sending billions of pounds, for example, to India, which can afford its own nuclear weapons programme, when we can't fund our NHS? And that's all it needs. It just needs more money. And I thought, well, you know, I can see the point in that. I can't really argue with that logic.
Look at all the money they've sent to China to train the football, how to come and show us how to play our national... I'm not a football supporter, in fact, I detest the game. But why send something like 30 million out to China to show them how to play football so they can join the league and make a fortune out of it?
Well, my concern about why governments are involved in humanitarian aid like this is that it allows them to play politics, but with our money.
It does.
You know,
you've got a man standing there with a suit on, big grin on his face, and a wodge of somebody else's money.
Yes, now, which they can then use to buy favours. And maybe, you know, they're buying favours for the Isle of Man or for the UK, whoever they're representing. But even so, it's not really why people are being taxed.
Well, the point is there, the Isle of Man, these people wouldn't even know where it is. There's a lot of people in the south of England don't know where the Isle of Man is, isn't it? Mine, a foreign country.
How about something on the tax return form or something that says I'd like to donate, you know, 5, 10, 20, 50 pounds to the Overseas Development Committee?
You'd have to employ another 10 tax inspectors.
Well, but you know what I'm saying? So that if you want to do that, if you're happy for the government to do that, then fine. But if you're not, you don't tick any of the boxes.
Well, it's a complicated matter in that score. I see where you're coming from. But it should be that the people will decide if they want to give it or not. And it should be a personal giving thing, not a national handout.
All right, some good points there, Howard. Thanks for coming on and talking about it. There should be an option to opt in or out of paying towards it. The money shouldn't come out of taxes. Let the people vote with the pens, says Gary. Do you think if there's a tick box on your tax form, if you want to contribute to overseas aid, and this can be set aside? Is that a text that's come in various bits? No, I can't see a part two to that. There seems to be a popular notion now that cost trumps morality. I fail to understand how people can have such disdain for their fellow human beings as to suggest that we shouldn't help our fellow members of the human race born into situations not of their making. These people should focus their anger on a system that makes the rich richer and the poor poorer. Well, there's truth in that, certainly. There's plenty of money for everything. It's how it's distributed. Let's look at those that have got the cash, not begrudge the little money we send for some of the world's most vulnerable people. I'm more than happy for some of my tax to be used for international aid. Sometimes we should just do things because it's the right thing to do. A conscience can't be measured in pounds and pence. Well, you make a good point, and I don't disagree with your point of view on that. But, some people can't afford that conscience. I mean, genuinely, some people are literally just about scraping by. And however little of their income tax goes in international aid, and it won't be a lot of money, should we really be taking from people in the Isle of Man that are just about getting by? On a serious note, charity is a good thing, but the problem is that a lot of the aid sent to third world countries is often confiscated, then used to feed the military in that country. Also, how much of the money donated is used to pay the accountants and executives running the charity. I think that because I've spoken to Phil Gorn about this when he was chair of the Overseas Aid Committee, and I think that the Isle of Man's donations generally are sort of project based. So it's like they want to build wells or they want to build dams or whatever it might be, clean water scheme. And I think that most of our international aid goes on projects like that rather than just sending a bunch of money to some bloke in a Sandhurst uniform with lots of medals that he's given to himself. Robin Peel says, going back 30 years, they had the appeals for the people in Sudan and the like, showing all the children and women starving. If the West hadn't sent food and water and money for shelter, they would have died. I know we complain about things here, but it's nothing compared to there. They haven't got a house or food. So I think we should do whatever we can to help others. Thank you, Rob. I think that we should stop aid, but ask the taxpayer if they want to contribute. We have food banks being used on the island for something charity. Charity begins at home. That from Carol. Thank you, Carol. Stu, we've been given money, etc. to aid for as long as I can remember. Not made any difference. And the young boy sitting in the muddy river is in 10 years will probably be an AK-47 wielding thug. And again, that doesn't go any further. Stu, regarding the starving children in Africa, why don't they also show the pictures of the fat cat Africans that are abusing the donations? True. Yes, Idi Amin didn't go without many meals, did he? Show pictures of the arms and ammunition that African countries are purchasing, but most importantly, why are their own governments not doing more to help their people? This has been going on since the Biafran appeals in the 60s, but today there's been no change, says Mal. Let's go to the lines. We've got Buster on. Hello, Buster.
Yeah, about 20 years ago, I went to India on holiday, and we went down to the centre of India, and two things struck out. First of all, clear water, and secondly, cultivation for crops. They were producing as much as they could manually, with no tractors or anything else. So I decided when I came back that what I was going to do was get equipment together, fill a container, and send it out to these guys. Plus, there was a water company who were putting in wells in village to village.
Yeah.
Now, cut a long story short, last time I was out there, whereas before they had enough food for probably about 80 to 100 people, that tractor was still going. It had a bit of love and care and attention by a mechanic that I found. But it's now working around about 400 to 500 acres of farmland.
Which is fantastic. The question is, why doesn't the government out there provide more tractors for people to increase the yield of the land?
Well, I went and seen the mayor or whatever, and there is clear discrimination.
Right.
And without any word, I'm not exaggerating.
Oh, this is the old caste system, is it?
Yeah, and also, it's like when I went to go through, the guide said, don't bring anything through on the plane when you're going through the magnety thing. Don't have anything. Anyways, I stupidly bought a bottle of Jack Daniels on the way in. Come to go through the screen, and the man said, "What have you got there?" And I said, "A bottle of Jack Daniels." And he said, "Right, I will have a nice drink tonight."
Yeah.
And I went, "Hey?" And he said, "Do you want to go to jail?" I said, "No." You have your bottle of Jack Daniels. But that, to me, I'm no expert on help. I think we've sunk about 25 bore wells where they've got water, clean water now, and they've got the tractor. It's all very basic. There's no electronic gadgetry at all. Set of harrows, whereas before they had one wonky old plough, they've now got a 3-footer and a 4-footer plough.
Which is fantastic, but should it be down to you and for people on this side of the world to be doing that when their own countrymen won't help them to do stuff like that? Like you say, the caste system is still alive and well. You know, that's Indians versus Indians. So, you know, shouldn't they have to look after their own people first?
Exactly, Stu. And I really, it despises, it really brings out the bad in me. But I know there's nothing I can do about that.
No.
I could jump up and down and shout. It's just embedded into society. But by these kind of, you know, what I'm doing, I think is if other people were to do that type of thing, but imagine, you know, their food was from 100 acres, say, and now with the benefit of a tractor, they can go to 400 or 500.
Yeah.
They're doing their own work to feed themselves.
Yeah, absolutely, which is the way to do it. And I think that, having talked to Phil Gorn about it over the years, I think that that's the kind of project that the Isle of Man is looking to support. All right, I need to move on, Charles, but thank you very much for your call. Stu, contraception's the way forward. Nobody needs more than 2.2 children for somebody else in the world to look after, says Ian. Ooh, strong, but I think that what happens is that if you think that you're going to lose your children as in terms of infant mortality, and the rates are very high, aren't they, in these undeveloped parts of the world, that's when people have more children. I think the Victorians here had more children, didn't they, when they thought that a lot of them might not survive. So maybe that's the problem. The trouble with giving international aid is that nothing seems to improve. If we want to do something, then I'd be happier if the money was donated to specific projects, then photos posted online so the public can see that the hard-earned cash has done something definite to help others, says Sue. Again, I think that that's kind of the idea. Send money to help any disaster area by all means, but don't give our much-needed money to all and sundry where we don't know if it's doing good or being used by despots. Charity organisations seem to know where to send it to do the most good, says JC. Yes, except that people then complain about the fact that charity organisations have got a lot of people who are on big salaries, and you know, the money that we give is a lot of it going on the salaries to the charities. I don't know. If you give more to the NHS, it'll just get swallowed up in inefficiencies no matter how much they get. Well, that might be a valid point as well, but on the basis that the government in the UK says, well, we'd like to do more, but we can't, we've not got the money. At least if they had the money, then they wouldn't have that as an excuse, would they? I agree with ticking a voluntary donation box on our tax returns. This happens on any professional annual membership form we complete. This could please all the people. Maybe not. Those in favour of tax being donated will probably complain, why me and not them? Ho hum, says Ali. Yes, that's true.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Could investment in a deep water berth to the island help to boost tourism? It's estimated creating a deep water berth in the island could cost up to £50 million. £50 million. But the benefits will apparently far exceed that figure. The scheme will be outlined to Tynwald members and the island's business community today. The presentation has been organised by the Isle of Man Shipping Association. Association Chairman Lars Ugland admits it's ambitious, but says the bigger picture needs exploring. Is a deep water berth the answer in attracting more visitors to the island, or would it be too expensive for the potential return? Tell us what you think about this. I've read a few things since we first talked about it yesterday on social media or whatever, where people say that cruise, and I think somebody made the comment yesterday on the programme, that cruise passengers generally are well fed before they leave the boat, so they're not going to come off the boat and spend a lot of money in restaurants in the Isle of Man, whether or not they're going to do anything else. And I think they've got a fairly limited time to do it as well. So I don't know, £50 million. I mean, I think the first time that this was mooted, it was going to be £1 million pontoon, and that was dear enough. But £50 million, well, I know nothing about the cruise business. I hasten to add, like most things, I know very little about the cruise business. It strikes me to take 1,000 years to get your money back on that. But the experts seem to think it could be very popular, and profitable. I wonder whether or not you or I went to the bank and said, we'd like £50 million, please, a business development loan, because we're going to build a deep water berth for the cruise ships and we're going to make loads of money out of that. I wonder whether or not we'd get the loans, or whether or not we'd have to put our houses up as collateral. Well, I'm fairly sure that we'd have to do that kind of thing. So if we didn't get the profits that we were predicting fairly quickly, then we'd be in serious trouble. The problem is that talking about spending public money like this is that nobody's ever really held accountable for it. Stu, I think a deep water berth would be a positive asset for the island, but we need to get on and build it as soon as possible so our well-heeled visitors can come ashore and see our unique award-winning horse trams before our visionary politicians destroy them. Right, okay, fair dues. Let's see what Ken makes of this. Hello, Ken.
I've never heard so much codswallop in all my life. I've been on the radio about this before when they suggested about floating out a breakwater.
You're not on the fence about this then, Ken?
No, well, now whether the £50 million is the right figure, if it was, 10 years ago when we had plenty of money, no doubt some politicians would have said, oh yes, this is a great idea, but it isn't the chief ministers, or I think that by looking into a deep water berth by 26, I think, but if you say 50 million, you can add another 10%.
Oh, at least.
Where they're going to get the stone from, I hope it's not going to be like the airport extension, which wasn't an extension to the airport, but all that stone came from Norway.
Yeah.
Great expense, because it had to be the right sort of stone.
Got to be the right sort of stone.
They don't, and somebody said before, they don't spend, they come to Peel. Yes, they get a coach, they go to the House of Manning, but they don't actually physically spend much money.
Well, that's what somebody said yesterday, I think, on the programme, yeah.
Yes, they might buy a fridge magnet, but I presume they get special deals going to the House of Manning. I don't think they'll be paying the £10 a charge, because there's no visiting ones. But and also, hopefully, the money, if we've got any spare money, will be going to redevelop the new Liverpool landing stage, or where the boat's going to go, because are we going to get anybody to put money into that?
Yeah.
The Manx government's going to pay.
Well, as my old dad used to say, if you got no socks, you can't pull them up. So it seems that the government's looking at all sorts of ways of spending money that it's not got at the moment. So 50 million quid for this, a landing stage at Liverpool, where's the money going to come from?
I've got no input into the talks that are going on at the moment, tonight's presentation at lunchtime, but whether there's any private money going to get sunk in, are the cruise liners going to put anything into it? It could be, of course, there might be some grants like Liverpool got to develop their UNESCO sort of waterfront, but
it will all come out in the fullness of time, Ken.
Yes, okay.
Thank you very much for your call. Good. If you've got a point of view about this one, don't be shy, share it with us. James called. This talk of a deep water berth, people are saying 50 million quid is a lot of money and it'll take a lot of making back. Well, yeah, it is a lot of money, says James, but by comparison, you'd have to multiply that by 80 to get to the figure of the pensions black hole for civil servants that the island is facing. I don't think people can quite quantify just how much of a problem we face in there. For me, that's a far more scary thought than 50 million quid for a cruise docking berth. Good point. Yeah, that puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? With regard to the berth for cruise ships, I'm sure that someone from Tynwald will waste some more money looking into it, then decide against it, says Neil in Junior Mills. OK, fair dues. Let's go to Ian on the lines about this. Hello, Ian.
I have a feeling that it could well be a good idea, but I personally have no clue about the economics of it. I'm a little bit sceptical of the repay itself in 5 years.
Yeah.
But we've got a brilliant opportunity. Mr. Whitaker lives on the island. He is the leading light of Peel Ports. Peel Ports are just in the process, together with Liverpool, in building a new cruise liner terminal in Liverpool.
Right.
Why doesn't the government approach them to undertake a feasibility study to see whether it is indeed economical?
Okay.
If it is economical, offer them a 50-50 partnership deal and they can design and, subject to approval, construct and operate it.
Yeah.
If they say it's not economical,
then forget it.
I seriously believe it's not economical, and don't throw a penny at it.
Yeah, that seems like a good pragmatic solution. I like that. Thank you, Ian. Don't know if it's already been suggested. Why not bring big cruises, etc., into the Queen's Pier? This will solve a lot of problems. Yeah, that came up yesterday, and I'd always thought from previous discussions about the Queen's Pier that isn't a proper deep water berth, even at the end of the pier there. The pier will be done up, more visitors for Ramsey, and won't have to worry about the state of Douglas Promenade. I personally think the capital should go back to Castletown, leave Douglas as a working port, so then it won't matter if the streets are not paved with gold, says Jean. Point out the streets that are paved with gold. Chinese, granite maybe. I've got a picture here of, it looks like a fairly old black and white picture from a newspaper about the sea terminal building with the horse trams going right into it, down the side, into a sort of almost like a station at the side of it. I don't know if that's the way that it used to be. And the comment from Davis too, you'll need to paint a picture with words. This photograph of the Examiner is where the tram track should run to single line, not the proposed shortened version to the Gaiety. This directly links to any expansion of the cruise facilities. It makes sense. Am I missing something, says Dave? No, I don't think so. On the assumption, he says, that extended cruise facilities are a good idea, which he thinks it is a good idea. Okay, fair dues. Leave the seabed alone, says Brian. Let's go to the lines. We've got Frank on. Hello, Frank.
I don't know where they get the 50 million from for this deep water. I think if they get a local company, we'd probably do it for 5.
Yeah, do you think so?
Yeah, instead of being ripped off like we always are.
Yeah.
But is this not an idea to sort of try and get more tourists and get more into the Isle of Man for tourism?
Yeah. That's the whole basis of this.
Yeah, well, why don't they do something about the American market? Nobody's ever come up with this yet.
I think that's what they're suggesting, that, you know, the American cruise market would come to the Isle of Man if we had the facilities for them.
It's all right. The cruise market with Americans is very limited when you think there's 250 million people in America.
Yeah.
What do you think is the greatest thing in America? What do Americans think about more than anything else?
Nostalgia, history, genealogy.
History. Well, why doesn't somebody grab a hold of doing something properly? Instead of advertising the northwest of England, advertising America.
Yes.
Do you know the founder of America, and every school child in America is taught this from when they go to school, the founder of America was a Manxman.
Really? I thought he was from Norfolk.
No, he's a Manxman, Miles Standish.
Right, okay. Interesting.
Now, that is something that if the American people knew that this was the birthplace of the founder of America, he was the first person to look after or was in charge of where they first landed and the encampment.
Yeah, yeah.
And some years ago, I went to that encampment. They've actually rebuilt it exactly the way it was.
What is it, Georgetown?
No, it's outside Boston.
Right.
Where they landed the boat the first time they landed the ship. And they've created it exactly the same as it was, but they've taken it a stage further. They've now got actors enacting the part of the people that were there.
Yeah.
They speak Old English. They don't speak anything else. You can't trick them. And I actually went to a policeman that was wandering about the village. And I said, where can I find Miles Standish? Oh, he said, he's over there in the cottage. So I went across. I said, can I speak to Miles Standish? He was cooking on a stove.
Yeah.
And he said, yes, that's me. I said, I've come from your home, the Isle of Man. Oh, and he was absolutely thrilled to bits. And he knew all about the Isle of Man.
I think you're probably right. Well, because we've got the American Manx Association as well, haven't we? So they've got lots of members.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where you've got your biggest market is probably America.
Yes.
And if you push the fact that Miles Standish, the founder of America, was a Manxman.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's fascinating. I didn't realise that. I thought that the founding fathers were all from sort of Norfolk area. So thank you, Frank. I appreciate that. I need to move on because I've got a few people who want to talk. John's on. Hello, John.
I thought after the last government went, I thought we got rid of the Department of Stupid Ideas, but obviously we haven't. It's still carrying on.
Okay.
Let's face it, we can't afford to finance the hospital properly. Yeah. We can't afford to do the roads. We can't afford to paint the white lines on the roads we've got. And yet these people talk about 50 million as if it's small change.
Yes.
It's absolutely crazy. When they talk about Ramsey and the pier, let's face it, when a cruise ship parks in Douglas Bay, when they go north towards Scotland, they go round the south of the island.
Right.
They never go north through Ramsey Bay.
Okay.
Because there's simply not enough water.
That's what I understood.
Not only at the pier, but at the whole bay is not deep enough.
Yes.
And it's absolutely, they'd have to dredge all of Ramsey Bay right round to the Mull of Galloway.
Right, gotcha.
And it's crazy, but I mean, this is... It's just absolutely crazy, this idea. I mean, we've been on a few cruises, and quite a few of them are anchor ports. No problem. Once or twice the weather has been bad and we haven't been able to go ashore, so they go to an alternative port. No big deal.
Yeah.
But did the Orkney Islands, who've got all these ships, did they spend 50 million to get them there, or were the facilities already there?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I doubt they spent 50 million.
Yeah. All right, John, thank you very much. Again, moving on, and let's see what Viv makes of this. Hello, Vivian.
About 25, 30 years ago, there was a homecoming of the Miles Standish ancestors.
Yes.
Because they went to his birthplace.
Right, gotcha.
And but there are an awful lot of books on the island about it, and I know there's still an awful lot of interest about it.
Right, okay.
So
good point, though, isn't it? You know, if we're looking to build up our tourism industry, then that would be a prime place to do it based on that alone.
Yes. And I know there are still all sorts of contact details from when the homecoming came.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying anything about the place of birth or the family involved or anything else, because that's not fair.
Okay.
But yes, a lot of people do know where it is, but it's in the north of the island, and there could be all sorts of things done. But I don't know. People, in some cases, or government, call it what you like, aren't interested in these historical facts. Unless it's a great big name, they're not interested.
Right.
But one of the Standish family was a vicar at one of the old Lizère churches, because he's named on the vicar's board in Lizère Church.
Right, okay. Interesting stuff. Thank you very much, Vivian. 50 million for a deep water harbour. Why don't they put the Manx Space Shuttle launch pad on the end of it, run the horse trams out to the end for a jolly? Crazy, but we are talking Manx politicians on a freebie here. Okay. Stu, yes, by all means, if the guy in the interview thinks he can recoup 50 million quid, go ahead and create a deep berth. Perhaps he can underwrite it in case when it fails, though, says Ian. Hey, boy, if it's such a good idea, then why don't the cruise lines stump up the 50 million? Let's just hope that the government don't waste a second on this, says Frank. It might sound daft, but cruise ships and full length of the promenade horse trams go hand in hand, says Albert. I'll accept that, and I'm not a fan of the horse trams, but I'll accept that. If businesses think that it'd be profitable, perhaps they should provide most of the money, says David H. Yes, I agree with that. You've already got a deep water berth. Ramsey Pier, says Ken. Well, as we've heard, it's not, Ken. A few people have said that now, so I tend to believe it. Stu, fast, cheap boats to the island for tourists and day trippers would bring in more money, says Sue. Now, there, to me, that's the post of the day. With 50 million quid, wouldn't it be better to buy a boat or something, or a couple of boats, and increase the frequency and reduce the cost of fares to and from the Isle of Man? Wouldn't that do more for our tourist economy than something for cruise liners? Revenue from port duties, that's where the money comes from, says somebody else. Cruise, Stu, I love seeing them in the bay. It'd be great if Manx residents could join the cruise from here for a few days and sail into the sunset. That's from Nicola. There are a few of our contributors I'd quite like to wave into the sunset. Derek called, it's been said one of the most attractive things to visitors about the Isle of Man is its history and heritage. The government's discussing stopping the horse trams halfway along the pram so they don't meet the boat. It's quite unbelievable. It's one of the main attractions to visitors with over 100 years of history, and they want to stop it halfway. It's mind-blowing. OK, Stu, it's not April Fool's Day yet, says Dave. Robin Peel, we visited Orkney 10 or 15 years ago, and the cruise passengers are Americans and they're some of the richest people in the world, and the place is really benefiting from it. OK. How about a conspiracy theory, says Frank? The deep water berth would be an ideal base for a U-boat to help the great and good to escape after wasting 50 million quid on it. More texts than time today on the programme, but I want to read this one out because it's burst me bubble now. Stu, the issue around Miles Standish as Manx and the captain of the Mayflower is not as plain as Frank thinks. It's not proven at all that the particular man was one and the same as the Manxman of the same name, so there's no market for tourism based on this tenuous and contested notion. Oh, that spoilt it for us.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast, featuring highlights from the programme over the past week.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should the island's abortion laws be reviewed or left as they are? And MHK is preparing to take the first step in his attempt to bring about far-reaching reform to the legislation. Ramsey member Alex Allinson, who's a GP in the town, will seek leave to introduce a private member's bill at the House of Keys' first sitting of the year on January the 24th. Abortion reform moved up the political agenda during the general election campaign last year, and Dr Allinson promised if elected he'd lobby for reform. Although legal in the Isle of Man, abortions are allowed only in limited circumstances, and as a result, more than 100 women each year travel off-island for terminations. As you might expect, the move's been backed by rival group Campaign for Abortion Law Modernisation, CALM, but a pro-life pressure group has branded a suggestion to update the island's abortion laws as regressive. Humanity and Equality in Abortion Reform, HERE, claims plans would open the system up to abuses and allow for a culture of abortion on demand. What do you think about this? And like I said earlier on, this is a highly emotive subject. People tend to look at this one of two ways. But is the island's law on abortion something that should be looked at again? Patrick called about this. He said, a topic which really irritates me is abortion. Woman's life and happiness is far more important to the consideration of an unborn child. I agree with the MHK who's to bring a change in the legislation forward. And all these people against it should get into a time machine and go back to the Middle Ages and stay there. I think their attitude is cruel and unnecessary. It's utterly appalling and it really irritates me. Life has a value, but there's a limit to its value. They should consider the woman who is alive. And they should consider what type of world and situation the child might be born into, because obviously there's a problem there. Good. Thank you very much, Patrick. And if you've got a point of view on this one, like I say, it's a very contentious issue. Always has been, as long as back as I can remember. And we can understand why, of course. And this is CALM's statement regarding Dr Allinson's motion for next week's House of Keys sitting. And they've sent it to me and say that they hope it clarifies their views. Campaign for Abortion Law Modernisation, CALM. On the 24th of January, MHKs will vote on a motion from Dr Alex Allinson to grant leave to modernise the abortion laws on the Isle of Man. Samantha Hurd from CALM says this is the first pivotal step towards a much-needed change in the law, which currently sees women forced to travel and pay upwards of £500 to have an abortion, or, for those who can't afford it, risk taking abortion tablets obtained from web-based suppliers, which could result in a jail term. At this stage, the motion is just a vote to grant leave to have the private member's bill drafted. There's no detail to be discussed at this time, but CALM is delighted for the first time in over 20 years the need to change this legislation is being seriously considered. We look forward to working with supportive MHKs to determine what a future law might look like. In particular, CALM believes that the need to ensure early abortion is available is paramount, as well as ensuring that those with exceptional reasons are provided for. Good. Thank you very much, CALM, for sending that in so that we can see what your point of view is on that. Graham wants to know whatever happened to the bendy buses and the diesel loco. We're not talking about that, Graham. The Isle of Man can't prevent abortions. All that can be done is to stop the less well-off, such as working-class teenagers, less able and unwilling to cope with a baby, whilst better-off middle-class older ladies jump in a plane to have an abortion across. That's scandalous. A morning-after pill costs pence, yet it's illegal here. So we really want to enforce motherhood on young girls who don't want it. There's a huge future social cost to that, says Roy B. Thank you, Roy. Thought a doctor's job was to preserve life, not to be involved in murder, says Jack. Well, we can see which side of the fence you're on, Jack. I mean, that's a whole other debate, really, that I'm probably not qualified to comment on particularly. But is it murder if a pregnancy is terminated before term? Is that murder? Somebody's not born, so how can you murder somebody who's not technically alive? What's Patrick talking about? It's irresponsible to have unprotected sex and fall pregnant. Why should the unborn child's right be of a secondary importance to the woman whose action caused her to fall pregnant, says James. Well, it is irresponsible to have unprotected sex and get pregnant if you don't want to be. Yes, it is, absolutely. No two ways about that. But, just knowing that isn't going to prevent it from happening. And so are you suggesting, James, that the right of the unborn baby, of the fetus, is more important than of the living mother? I think you can see which side of the fence I fall on this one. To abort a baby after the fetus is more than 7 or 8 weeks old, to me, is murder, since the whole baby's system starts to connect and establish itself. It's awful to carry out an abortion. It must be done very quickly for everybody's sake. To get rid of a baby after that, to me, is murder, says Anne. Okay. If you've got a point of view on this one, and as we can see, our listeners are fairly polarised on the issue, but which side of that debate do you fall into? Your comments. So Patrick thinks an unborn baby isn't alive and that life is of no consequence. Oh dear, says Dave. I think what he's saying is that, you've got the mother who is definitely alive, no two ways about it, alive, sentient thinking. And Dave, that's a very polarised opinion, and it depends at what point you think life begins. Is it at 1 month of gestation? Is it 3 months, 6 months, full term? Because you must concede that in an early pregnancy, we're not talking about a life, are we? Or are we? If you're religious and you believe that somebody is alive from the very moment of fertilisation, then difficult one. It's a mother's decision only, says Stella, and if she's made that decision, she'll go away, so why should she have to, for even more distress, as it won't be a decision made lightly. No, I'm sure it won't be a decision made lightly by anybody. Okay, thank you very much for your call, Stella. And we've got Peter on the line. Hello, Peter.
Now then, first of all, it isn't murder if the child is unborn. Yes, the child is alive, and the child is alive from the very start, from the very moment of fertilisation, but It isn't murder because to be murder legally, the child has to have a life independent of its mother's body. It has to be what's called, strangely in law, a reasonable creature.
Oh, right.
But it is the crime of abortion. A lot of people don't appreciate this. The way the Act is worded, both in the United Kingdom and more clearly in the Isle of Man, is if you look at the 1995 Act, the short title is the Termination of Pregnancy, brackets, Medical Defences, brackets, Act. Now that reflects the fact that abortion is a crime, but there could be some medical defences, and that's how the Act is worded.
I see. But, is it not just looking at it from the legal point of view then, Peter, rather than from your religious standpoint, is it not reasonable that the law is looked at again now? Because there have been a lot of advances since probably 1995, the day after pill and things like that. I don't know if they were available then.
I'm not aware that there are all these defects. I remember the debate very, very clearly indeed, and I'm really very surprised and saddened that once again it's being raised. And so my answer is no, it doesn't need to be looked at again. The second thing is, it isn't correct to say that our law is more restrictive than anywhere in the United Kingdom, because Northern Ireland, being part of the United Kingdom, which of course we are not, has a far more restrictive position than in the Isle of Man. So I would like to correct that misapprehension.
Okay, all right, no, that's fair. All right, Peter, thank you very much. Stu, I feel that there should be a regulated, genuine reason for an abortion, i.e. rape, with a tight time limit to when this can be done, never just off a whim. Well, with respect, I don't think any woman would have an abortion on a whim. I think that she would think it through very carefully before she would do it. So I'm not sure about that. MHK should bear in mind a vote on abortion is a life or death decision. Many a woman's life has been ruined by having an abortion. Also, is this not going to be another cost to the NHS, another few million a year to find? I don't think it's going to be anything like that, especially if you use the morning after pill more often. And maybe the answer to people who think that, it's going to encourage women not to take proper precautions, birth control precautions, and get an abortion just at the drop of a hat, maybe what they ought to do is to make this day after pill cost £100, legal, but, if it costs us £1 to buy, our NHS £1 to buy it, and we sell it at £100, at least it'll cover some of the costs, and make it, a poorer solution than taking precautions beforehand. But we all know that precautions can go wrong as well. Completely agree with you, Caller Patrick's views. As for the HERE spokesperson's views, they're outrageous. How on earth can a human right of a fetus be more important than that of a woman's? In fact, how can a fetus be protected by human rights legislation at all? And that's the question. I mean, that's what people have been arguing about for as long as I can remember, certainly. More of your comments. I wonder how long it would take one of these anti-abortionists, if the young daughter got pregnant, to get a ferry to Liverpool. Well, I expect it's one of those things where our philosophy on things might change very dramatically based on lifetime experience. I don't know. Text here, who are we to tell anybody else what to do? My concern, though, is where would they do this in the Isle of Man? Because if you sneeze in Douglas, somebody in Ramsey will hear about it. That's true as well.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
A proposed plastic bag levy will be considered by the Department of the Environment, Food and Agriculture. DEFA officials are vowing to investigate how a voluntary levy can be introduced here by assessing potential benefits and implications. Previously, Ramsey MHK Alex Allinson asked members if a levy of 5 or 10 pence on plastic bags could be introduced. He said the income generated could be ring-fenced to benefit the environment. So, do you think a voluntary levy is a good idea? Is it important that any money raised by future levies be kept on island? Will the money end up in the right places, do you think? Or is this just another way of charging us more money for what we've been getting for free for many, many years? Ring-fenced for environmental projects, freeing up more money for public sector pensions, suggests one cynic. Stu, it's already been ring-fenced by MNH to go to government. They just couldn't let another opportunity pass without screwing the public again. When are government going to cut costs instead of thinking of ways to charge us for everything? That's a very good point, isn't it? When are government going to cut costs instead of thinking of ways to charge us for everything? I like that one. Charges for bags are in place in the UK, and some like Pets at Home, B&Q, Holland and Barrett, etc. already charge for bags here. I think Marx's do, don't they, as well? It's too posh for me. I can't afford to go to Marx's. All I find is that I just won't buy bags and tend to drive in order to put stuff in the car, which completely negates the environmental impact, I'm afraid. I have very sooty footprints, except in regards to Manx meat. Right then, so what do we think about this? Is it a good idea that there's a proposed plastic bag levy, or is it another case of government finding another way to charge us for something that's been free for as long as anybody can remember? And should they be looking at cutting their costs before they start levying additional charges on people? Another text in, another stealth tax. Well, the politicians would say that that's not the case. That's not the idea of this. And that I think across when they first brought this in, I think that the use of disposable plastic bags, carrier bags, went down massively. And I think that that's the overarching desire in doing this. Maybe that's not a bad thing. But I don't know. It does feel as though the answer that government has to everything these days is, let's charge people for it. And we know that that's a way of getting people to do what you want. But is it also a way of bringing in money? And I think a few of our more cynical listeners have decided, yes, it's the government trying to soak us again. Good stuff. My big bugbear is that I don't mind paying for a carrier bag just as long as it doesn't have the shop name or logo on it, as this constitutes advertising that I'm paying for. So the price should be paid for by the shop and not from Not Tight Steve. Not right, Steve. I don't know about Not Tight. How short-sighted can you get? Your contributor would rather drive to the shop than pay for bags. 4 bags is 20 pence. How much is it going to cost in petrol, says Tony. Well, it's just that we're all getting a bit fed up being told what to think about things, and that we've got to do things in a certain way. And I don't know about other people. I think maybe our contributors are a bit like me. You get to the point where you just dig your heels in, just out of sheer bloody mindedness. Not in your life will I pay for a plastic bag after spending a load of dosh on goods I refuse to shell out for a flimsy bag, says JC. Okay. Free plastic bags were stopped in the Irish Republic years ago. Every time my poor mum comes over to visit, she fills up a suitcase with my excess. Heaven knows what she'll do once I start getting charged and getting fewer bags. That's from Bazzy. Yes, I went over to Dublin a few years ago to see a friend and went to the supermarket, and I was amazed that there were no bags at the checkout. Southern Ireland put a bag tax on the use of the bags, went down about 60%. Use of the bags went down by about 60%, but the use of bin liner bags went up by about the same amount. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me somehow. Has there been an increase in dog fouling in the UK now that they're charging for bags there, says Alan? I don't think so, but I don't know. It's a point. The joke of it is that the food packaging is not only unnecessary, but is far more harmful to the planet than the free plastic bags that they supply, says Maggie. I agree entirely. And my personal bugbear at the moment is when you get meat, if you treat yourself to a bit of steak in the supermarket, because it looks nice on the shelf, and you get it home and it's on one of those black plastic trays, shrink wrapped with a seemingly fairly thick film on it, and they're virtually impossible to get into. The number of times I've nearly taken fingers off slicing into them. Personally, I've used my own bags, one big one for heavy or bulky goods and heavy duty carry bags for a number of years, and they're in use every week and still going strong, will last a long time. That's from Colin. Thank you, Colin.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Is the potential loss of parking spaces on Douglas Promenade a concern? It's something which could happen when the road is redeveloped, apparently, if the horse tram tracks are laid on the seaward side from Broadway to the sea terminal. Tynwald this week backed proposals for a single track on that stretch of the prom. What do you think about this? Is the potential reduction in parking spaces a concern for businesses and other people in the area? Or is there more than enough parking in the surrounding area? Tell us what you think. Sounds like a complete nightmare to me, complete and utter nonsense. I'm not a civil engineer, so I expect there's probably a very good reason for this. But if at the moment we've got 2 lanes of traffic, 2 tram tracks and parking both sides, how can reducing the number of tram tracks get rid of all those car parking spaces? And again, sorry to get on my hobby horse about this, but it does seem that the motorist is the person that's the most put upon in terms of any of these changes of use things, and the person who's paying more to actually use the roads that with them being banned from using. Just my point of view. You may disagree. You often do. Let's see what Alistair makes of this. Hello, Alistair.
First and foremost, I've never heard as much nonsense. I hate to use the word, but it is nonsense that's being spoken by our minister this morning. I mean, to lose 91 car parking spaces, I mean, can you imagine what that's going to do to Strand Street?
Yeah, it's going to completely decimate it, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And it's not just the retailers, it's also the people who want to just pop into town and pick something up, and they might not want to go in a car park where they've got to pay for an hour or whatever.
Well, they don't. I mean, why do you think Chester Street car park's half empty all the time?
Yes, yeah. For
that reason. And, I mean, really, common sense has got to prevail here. But I think that there's a reason why they're having to do this. And I think the reason is quite simple. And it's because they're going to have to apply for planning permission for this single track. And I am convinced that the planning permission will not go through on the grounds of health and safety.
Okay.
If it's up the middle of the road.
Yes. But if it's to go up the middle of the road, they won't need planning permission because there's already a track there, isn't there?
Correct. That's right, but it's not in the middle.
Ah, right.
You see, there are 2 tracks there.
Yes.
Which are both adjacent of the middle.
Ah, right. So if they were to just lay one instead...
So to go up the middle of the road, there would have to be planning permission sought.
I don't know.
I would think so.
Okay.
And I'm pretty convinced that any planning application will be turned down on the grounds of health and safety.
Yes.
I mean, the inspector made that very, very evident during the 3-day inquiry.
The thing that annoys me, Alistair, I don't know about you, is this presumption always, and it's almost like being a smoker these days. If you're a motorist, there is this presumption that motorists are just, insensitive and don't care about their environment, and as long as they can park outside the shops. But, I mean, surely that's the whole benefit of having a car, isn't it?
Well, of course. But, I mean, the other thing is, I don't want to disagree with the heritage people, but in actual fact, health and safety is a big issue on even these trams that are the electric trams.
Yeah.
And we haven't yet seen the report of the one that came down the Snaefell that came off the rails.
Yes.
Now, when that report comes out, I mean, surely health and safety has a part to play in all this.
Yeah, you'd have thought so, yeah.
And really, I mean, I don't think it's a starter. I'm going to be very surprised if this horse tram continues up to the sea terminal in the end.
OK, well, we'll have to wait and see, I guess. Hey, boy, just one single horse tram track up the centre of the prom, resurface it, redo the white lines. No more taxpayer-funded gifts for the Sefton Group. That should be it. Job done. Facts, says Frank. Opinion, Frank. Good afternoon, Stu. I feel an idea would be a multi-storey car park with new horse tram stables with it. Would be a good idea, that from Alan. Please keep our free parking on Loch Prom from 2 over 75, as it's great for the shops, etc., says Derek. Well, absolutely, Derek, yeah. Stu, a new cultural centre equals more government employees when the Manx Museum's only a couple of 100 yards away, says Doug. Stu, it's a shame that the waste ground on the corner of Regent Street couldn't be used as a pay and display, says Charles. Well, it is a wasteland as well, that. It's privately owned, as I understand it, so the government's got no say over it. But let's go to the lines. We've got Sandy on. Hello, Sandy.
Well, it's wonderful, but I think if you look generally at it, Stuart, what you're looking at here is the government had decided to cut down the parking and increase the fees and provide somewhere else.
Yeah.
The government, in civil service terms, and the MHK is nearly as bad, is terminally stupid. You've only got to look back to Christmas when what did they do to get more people to go shopping? They put free parking on in the evening so you could go shopping.
Yeah.
If they need free parking in the evening to get people to shop, wouldn't it work in the daytime as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Am I missing something?
I don't think you are. I think you make a very good point. Thanks for calling, Sandy. It does seem that they're hell-bent on making it more difficult for people to use cars, and they ought to be making it simpler. Cultural Quarter, who needs that? There are no visitors worth talking about, and they're going to lose 90 free parking spaces. It's all a racket to squeeze more money from the Cultural Quarter for them to pat each other on the back and waste more public money, says James. Afternoon, Stu. Having just listened to what was said about the seafront, it's a wonderful idea with what could be a future seafront problem. These days people who won't walk any more than 100 yards away from their car. That from Gary and Ramsey. Did I hear correctly? Another roundabout given Manx motorists and their roundabout antics, just what's needed, says Tony. Stu, by the time the Muppets and DOI have done yet another pretty picture and put in concrete sidecars, traffic calming, etc., you'd be lucky to ride a bike through it. Just look at the bridge in Laxey. That's got to have a boat stuck on the side and two Daleks waiting to draw ray guns at each other, not to mention the stone from the beach, and they must have Chinese paving. Back to the lines, we've got Tommy on. Hello, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, Frank's put it in a nutshell.
Okay.
One track in the middle. You don't get the volume of traffic. I've said this so often, and still they prevaricate and go on. And Ray Harmer, what a muppet he is. Listen, what's going to happen if they do this scheme then? They're going to have to cut across. If they put one on the seaward side, the tram's going to have to cut across right in front of all the major traffic going both ways, Stu. How is that going to work out?
Well, I'm going to wait until we can see the plans, because we've not got any plans really to criticise as of yet. So we'll wait and see. Let's move on and see what Peter Kelly makes of. Peter, good afternoon.
Well, having just heard it, I can only describe it as a classic case of dog in the manger.
Okay.
The department wanted to get rid of the trams.
Yes.
From a point, Broadway to Sefton, somewhere unspecified position, down to the sea terminal. So in Tynwald, they lost the vote. 17 voted for a single track. Now, I'm quite convinced that the 17 thought single track meant continuation straight down the middle.
Yes.
People get on and off exactly like they have, but it would give slightly more room for moving traffic or turning, parking on the landward side to diagonal like it is on the other side.
Yes.
And so what happens, that's agreed, single track, so the department comes back and says, oh well, we're going to put single track over here, and you're going to lose 91 spaces as a result.
So not even a Pyrrhic victory,
no,
but definitely going down in flames.
Like Angela Moffat thing, say something outrageous, and then the people, we don't want to lose 91 spaces. Well, they didn't have to.
No.
Now, Alistair, whoever he was, said about planning permission. At the moment, you've double track.
Yeah.
So in terms of land use, from the outer side of one of the tracks to the outer side of the other track is tramway.
Yeah.
Right, the full width between the two and the gap in the middle. So if you want to put a single track straight down the middle, you're putting it in an area that's technically zoned as tramway.
Yes.
Now, I'm sure when the MER at Laxey rearranged all the lines there going round the corner and creating tight bends, and when they were up Snaefell, and instead of running the lines downwards so the trams didn't run away, they put them continually going up. But they didn't go for planning permission to do that, yet it was on the area of the present track. I think it's just raising the heckles. Now, it was interesting that the report that was laid before Tynwald, between deciding originally they would continue and then deciding not to, it said quite categorically, and this is very much a case of the tail wagging the dog, whichever civil servant wrote the report, if there was single track down to the sea terminal, then we would use it, but very rarely.
Yeah.
Now that was outrageous, really, for a civil servant to say, well, if you wanted, we'd put it. The cultural quarter, total misconception, it's a name. And what the cultural quarter was on the plan, which doesn't have planning approval because it was withdrawn, was just a sea of granite paving in front of the Sefton, narrowing into the Gaiety and in front of the properties beside the Sefton. And in it, within the paving, was a 3D map of the Isle of Man, sort of sticking up 6 inches or whatever, with a brass rail going round set within the paving to indicate the TT course. And then beside it was going to be a carved granite motor TT bike and sidecar, on which people could sit in the sidecar and be photographed. That was it. That was the cultural centre. Nothing else. Nothing to do with museums. Nothing to do with theatres.
Right.
Nothing to do with Manx dancing. Just a complete sea of granite and a map and a motorbike.
All right. Thank you very much indeed for calling. Stu, have I missed something? The cultural quarter. Blimey. Yes. Stu, is it still costing £21 million? I think it's still going to cost a chunk of money to do the whole promenade scheme. Whether it's 21 million, I don't know. Leave the tracks where they are in the middle and leave the parking for the people. Yes. Parking for the people. Wolfie Smith. Why is there such an obsession with car parking over here? Because so many people want to use cars. That's why. More than enough car parking spaces in Douglas. The issue is people don't realise that you don't have to park in a designated pay and display car park. You can park in spaces on roadsides, Hill Street, for example. Yeah, if you can get a park there, less and less people using Douglas to shop. Well, it's fewer and fewer, really. So no issue with reducing spaces. Not for you, maybe. What are they thinking of? Tracks should be where it is, in the middle with no loss of parking. Is this all to provide a so-called cultural zone? I've never heard one person say that they want a so-called culture zone, either on your show or in the papers or in the street. The poor horse trams will now get the blame for any parking lost instead of this ridiculous culture scheme. Come on, get a grip. Leave the tracks where they are. That's from Liz. Plenty of room in the car parks. If they put the tram on the walkway, there's enough room there. Oh, don't start that one again. Why is so much said about devastating Strand Street when is there nowhere else to go shopping? Well, it is the main shopping street in Douglas, isn't it? Ridiculous point made by the caller saying that people don't want to pay. It costs £1, same thing as Liverpool or any other city would be a £5 minimum, and people just get on with it. If you need to park in town, you'll be happy to pay £1. As long as it's somewhere convenient to where you want to be. What else? Why don't the government buy the remainder of the Villiers eyesore and allow parking there, says Alan. Well, it presumes that the owners of that land want to sell it, and I don't know if they do. Horse tramps, is there any chance we could talk to one of the horses? Surely old Billy would have more of a clue than our minister. He says we now have a plan, but then says no plans drawn up yet. And then he says that he's moving 91 cars so he can put it on the edge of the prom, but refuses to put it 3 feet to the left and onto the walkway to save the cars. God help us. Trust me, Stu, please ask Billy for a better idea. That from Will.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads. Our thanks as ever to everyone who took part in the programme. If you'd like to get involved in the discussion yourself, you can call, text or email between midday and 2 p.m. on weekdays, or you can get your thoughts to us via Facebook or Twitter using the hashtag #MRTalkingHeads. You can listen back to each day's programme in full using the on-demand section of manxradio.com. And if there's anything you think we should be discussing on the programme, let us know by emailing talk@manxradio.com. But that's it for now, so until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being Shaw.
Terms and conditions apply.